Sara Ahmed's The Cultural Politics of Emotion, 2004, is one of the most influential contributions to feminist theory, cultural studies, and affect theory in the 21st century. In this groundbreaking work, Ahmed challenges traditional understandings of emotions as purely psychological or individual phenomena. Instead, she argues that emotions are deeply social and political. They circulate between bodies, attach to objects, and shape collective identities. Emotions, according to Ahmed, do not simply reside within individuals, but work to align subjects with collectives, produce boundaries between groups, and sustain structures of power. Through her analysis, Ahmed reconfigures the relationship between feeling and politics, showing that emotions are not merely reactions to the world, but active forces in the making of worlds. She blends feminist phenomenology, post-structuralism, and critical race theory to explore how emotions stick to certain bodies, shaping the ways in which we experience others, institutions, and the nation. Emotions as social and political forces. Ahmed begins by rejecting the common sense view that emotions are private states or internal experiences that belong to individuals. She argues that this view obscures the collective and historical dimensions of emotional life. Instead, emotions should be seen as forms of sociality that mediate the relationship between the individual and the collective. They are not only about how we feel, but also about what we do and how we are moved. For Ahmed, emotions circulate between bodies. They are not static but dynamic, constantly being transferred, reoriented, and attached to new objects. When someone says, "I hate you," for instance, hatred does not simply express an internal feeling, but creates a relation. It binds the subject to the object of hate and situates both within a broader network of social meaning. In this sense, emotions are performative. They do things, produce effects, and help to shape social reality. Ahmed draws on phenomenology, especially the work of Edmund Husserl and Maurice Merleau-Ponty, to describe how emotions orient us towards some objects and away from others. This concept of orientation becomes central to her argument. Emotions are not simply felt but direct our attention, forming attachments that organize our sense of belonging. The role of emotions in identity formation. One of Ahmed's most original contributions lies in her exploration of how emotions shape collective identities, such as national, racial, gendered, and sexual identities. She argues that emotions create affective economies, systems of feeling through which subjects and collectives are formed. For instance, national identity is not simply based on shared territory or culture, but on shared feelings, such as pride, fear, or love that circulate among citizens. Love for the nation, for example, can be mobilized through images of the national flag or through narratives of sacrifice and belonging. These emotional attachments make the nation feel like home, while simultaneously designating outsiders, immigrants, refugees, racialized others, as threats to this emotional community. In this way, emotions are central to the politics of inclusion and exclusion. They delineate who belongs and who does not, who is loved and who is feared. Ahmed writes that emotions stick to certain bodies. Some bodies come to embody fear, hate, or disgust. Through this process, social hierarchies and power relations are reproduced. 3. Feminism, pain, and anger. Ahmed devotes significant attention to feminist emotions, especially anger, pain, and love. In the chapter Feminist Attachments, she explores the figure of the feminist killjoy, a woman accused of ruining the happiness of others by pointing out sexism, racism, or injustice. The feminist is often seen as being too emotional, too angry, or resentful, which in turn delegitimizes her critique. Ahmed defends this anger as politically productive. She argues that feminist anger is not simply a personal reaction, but a response to systemic injustice. To express anger at oppression is to refuse the emotional norms that demand women's happiness and complicity. The feminist killjoy thus becomes a political figure who exposes the emotional labor that sustains patriarchal and heteronormative worlds. Pain, too, is a central theme. Ahmed discusses how pain connects individuals and groups not through identification or empathy alone, but through the recognition of shared vulnerability. However, she warns that empathy can also be appropriative when it erases the difference between self and other. True solidarity, for Ahmed, requires staying with the discomfort of difference rather than seeking emotional assimilation. Char 4. Fear, Hate, and the Politics of the Nation. In her analysis of fear and hate, Ahmed examines how these emotions operate in the production of racialized and national boundaries. Fear does not arise spontaneously. It is cultivated and circulated through media, political discourse, and public rhetoric. For example, fear of the stranger or the terrorist is not based on a specific event, but on a repetition of associations that link certain bodies, often brown, black, or Muslim bodies, with danger. Fear sticks to these bodies, shaping how they are perceived and treated. This emotional economy reinforces racial hierarchies and legitimizes practices of exclusion, such as immigration control or surveillance. Similarly, hate operates by attributing the cause of unhappiness or threat to a specific group. When hate circulates, it binds together a community of those who hate, producing a sense of solidarity against a shared enemy. Ahmed connects this mechanism to nationalist and racist ideologies, where emotions like hate and fear are essential in sustaining collective identity. Love and the reproduction of power. Ahmed's chapter on love offers a complex reading of how positive emotions can also sustain domination. Love is often idealized as a universal good, but Ahmed reveals its ambivalent political role. Love for the nation, family, or community can bind people together, but it can also demand conformity and obedience. For instance, to love the nation might require loving its history and symbols while forgetting or excusing its violence. Similarly, familial love can reinforce gender and sexual norms by insisting on certain forms of belonging. Ahmed's insight is that emotions considered positive, like love or happiness, are not inherently liberatory. They can be used to police boundaries and silence dissent. In her critique of multiculturalism, Ahmed argues that declarations of love and tolerance often conceal deeper inequalities. When a white liberal subject claims to love diversity, that love may position them as benevolent while keeping racial others in the position of being tolerated rather than equal. 6. Emotions and queer phenomenology. Ahmed's ideas in the cultural politics of emotion are closely linked to her later work, Queer Phenomenology, 2006, where she develops the notion of orientation more explicitly. In both books, emotions orient bodies towards certain objects, producing lines of connection that define what is normal or deviant. In the 2004 text, this is already evident in her discussion of how emotions stick differently to queer bodies. For example, disgust or shame often attach to homosexuality in heteronormative societies, positioning queer desire as deviant. Yet, Ahmed also sees potential for resistance in these very emotions. Shame, when reworked collectively, can become a source of solidarity and pride, a way of reclaiming the stigmatized body. 7. The method and style of Ahmed's writing. Ahmed's approach is interdisciplinary and deeply reflective. She combines textual analysis, phenomenology, and political theory, drawing examples from media, literature, and everyday life. Her style is accessible yet rigorous, moving between theory and personal reflection, a hallmark of her feminist writing. One of her methodological innovations is the concept of affective economies. Emotions circulate like currency, accumulating value through repetition. This framework allows her to analyze both macro-level structures, like nationalism or racism, and micro-level experiences, like interpersonal encounters. It bridges the gap between individual psychology and collective politics. Ahmed's work also redefines what counts as theory. She situates herself within feminist and post-colonial traditions that value lived experience as a source of knowledge. Emotions, often dismissed as irrational or private, become legitimate and necessary objects of critical inquiry. 8. The cultural politics of emotion had profound influence across disciplines: feminist studies, queer theory, cultural studies, anthropology, and political theory. Its political message is clear. Emotions are not apolitical. They are central to how power works. Understanding the emotional dimensions of politics allows us to see how ideologies are sustained and how they might be disrupted. Ahmed encourages readers to think critically about how they are moved, what makes them angry, fearful, or happy, and to trace these feelings to their social and historical origins. In doing so, she opens up space for resistance. By recognizing that emotions are shaped by power, we can begin to feel differently and therefore act differently. Her concept of the feminist killjoy, in particular, has become a powerful cultural figure, representing those who refuse the demand to be cheerful in the face of oppression. This refusal of compulsory happiness is itself a political act, a way of reclaiming the right to feel otherwise. 9. Conclusion. Sarah Ahmed's The Cultural Politics of Emotion revolutionizes our understanding of feeling as a site of political struggle. By tracing how emotions circulate between bodies and objects, Ahmed reveals that they are not merely individual experiences, but collective forces that shape the contours of social life. Emotions for Ahmed are not neutral. They are shaped by history, power, and ideology. They bind communities together, justify exclusions, and sustain systems of domination. Yet they also offer the possibility of transformation. If emotions can reproduce power, they can also disrupt it. Ahmed's work invites us to inhabit emotions differently, to reclaim anger as a feminist tool, to question love's complicity with power, and to resist fear's capacity to isolate. Ultimately, the cultural politics of emotion is not only a theoretical intervention, but an ethical and political call to recognize how we are moved and to use that awareness to move toward justice.